Hey everyone, Tyler here with our week 2 discussion post this week. In this week's discussion, we're going to be talking about a K through 8 school, Bartlett Canyon Academy, where Ms. Patel wants to speak to the rest of the staff about how there's influx of the students, and they all come from substantially different, backgrounds educationally, special needs, and home environments. So from the local community, and she wants to know how they should address this problem of having such diverse learners. She says problem. I see how she could say problem, but that's a weird word to use. But yes, the problem of like having a bunch of different learners from different backgrounds, it can be challenging, definitely. So she asked that question, and Miss Diaz is the first one to answer. She says that the group should be split up at each grade level into high, average, and low groups. I'm assuming when she says that, she's talking academic performance. Not really sure what else they'd be talking about, but in terms of academic performance, I do think that she's onto something, but also kind of not onto something. And I agree with Mr. Yang in some ways, but to speak on her in regards to between class specifically grouping, I do think it is important to separate a little bit, only because there's an idea of you learn, whether it's like sports or academics or anything really in life, you learn and grow best when you are put with someone who is above you or below you in skill or academic performance in this case, by a little bit, not by a ton. So, and then that's where you see the most growth usually. So same thing with those lower groups. If they're paired with people that are way above them, top of the class, they're not going to learn anything from them. They're just going to be way behind. They're going to be lost. Same thing with highs. If they're grouped with low people, they're probably academic performance wise, they're going to be feeling like they're not gaining anything from that relationship. But if you put average students with low and then average students with high, there's a way less of a gap, and they're both going to be able to learn off of each other in a way that low and high wouldn't be able to. So I do think she's kind of onto something in that kind of way. But I'm also with Mr. Yang that you need to have diversity and culture. There's more to school than just academics. You learn a lot when it comes to being a person and what it's like to be in a diverse environment with diverse group of people and thoughts and ideas. So I think you still need those students to interact for sure, so that you can just get the influx of all backgrounds possible. And I think in certain classes where academic performance isn't as important or strained or necessary in that curriculum for that class, it's okay to put the highs and low academic performance groups together for sure. Some things like PE, there's definitely like low academic performance groups that probably could be super athletic, and then there's probably people in the highs that are athletic but some that aren't. So it's like it wouldn't be as important there that there's a gap in terms of academic performance, because maybe some guys in the low group could outrun them by 3 minutes on a mile. So, and then same thing with like maybe some art classes, where it's more about creativity and stuff like that. I think it would be okay to group them together. But maybe like STEM classes, like math, science, English language, stuff like that, maybe it's a good idea to have a little bit of class separation. So who knows? That's what I think a little bit about the between classes. Now within class grouping, I think it isn't as important to separate them, especially if you are practicing those between class groupings when it comes to those academic performance based, classes like math and science and English language, because within that class you're going to have the average and the low, or the average and the high performance kids together. So you do want them to intermix and mingle so that they can learn off of each other. You don't want just like all the low group students together and then all the low group or the average or high group students together, because they're probably not going to learn anything off of each other. I mean, they might, of course, learn something, but you're going to see much better performance, I think, and results if you mix those groups together. So I think within the classroom, it's probably important to have just a mix of everything. But within between classes, depending on the class, it might be good to separate a little bit, since they have such an influx of diverse, backgrounds and special needs and home environments and stuff like that. So I guess I've talked about both the positives and the constraints about both of those things. Now the final part, does the age level of children change with their needs? Kind of similar to what we've been talking about this week in the NUNAV, modules. We talk a lot about, development in students from depending on what their age they are. So 4 years old, 5, 6 to 8, and stuff like that, up to 11 in adolescence. It's they're gonna have different atypical and typical, you know, developmental. I guess I don't know what to call them. I don't want to say guidelines, but kind of like indicators of where they're at. And I think in this particular scenario, we're going to focus on cognitive and social emotional. So I do think that depending on the age level, off the top of my head, I don't remember each one, what's typical and atypical. I'm sure I could, but yeah, those are things you'd have to address because this is a K through 8 school. So it's going to be mostly, 5 6 7 5 years old all the way up to what, like 13 or something? Yeah, probably about 13 years old. So I think within each of those grades, it might be important, especially for the younger ones. It's probably important for all of them, to be honest. Now that I think about it, probably important for all the grades to have that mix, because I feel like that would be a good strategy. What I said with the high average and the low average together, for certain classes, that's just a good, I think, rule of thumb for a lot of things. But I think it is important for all grade levels for K through 8 and probably beyond, for them to have an influx of ideas and different diverse backgrounds, because this is where they're learning the most. So yeah, I think it doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't matter what the age level in children's, what their needs are and how it changes. I do think it's something that you have to look at, especially if you want to look at that chart, the atypical versus typical that we had in the NUNAV. It's really good just to make sure that you're touching on some things and looking out for some behaviors that are atypical and address them with the student themselves. But as an overall, I do think it's still a good idea to, have a little bit of mix for sure. But academic wise, yes, I think splitting them a little bit would be beneficial in certain classes. I hope I addressed everything correctly in this, but thank you for listening, and I will see you guys next week.